know what? While we're on the subject of lead playing and big bands, let's just talk a little bit about some of the great bands that you guys are a part of here in LA. Of course, Gordon Goodwin's band is an amazing band. What an ensemble! I've heard the band a couple times live. In fact, I think out at the Elmhurst Jazz Festival, I heard you guys a couple times. It's mind blowing. I mean, it's just amazing. But other great bands, Bob Florence, of course, Tom Kubas, Sammy Nestico. I was always a big fan of the Pat Metheny music record that Bob Kurnow did. I thought you guys both played so beautifully.
It's great.
Yeah. But anyway, maybe just touch on a couple of your favorite big band things you guys
We got bulk of our playing together in Tom Kubas' band, I believe. I mean, that's when we really started working a lot together. And George Graham was actually the first trumpet player in the band, but Wayne got a lot of the first trumpet stuff because he's Wayne, you know. But and that's the first leader that told me to play first trombone. I was sitting second, third, just waiting for the next solo. You know, it's okay, I'll just gear up for the next solo. And he says, "You play first." I'm going, "Okay, whatever." So I was thrown into the fire, and that band is just fantastic because technically it's really difficult to play Tom's music because sometimes he just writes these fast things that just are almost unplayable, and so it was a challenge to play the music. And Tom's just a beautiful guy. I don't know if you ever met him, but he's just a super
great cat, man.
Yeah, always a fan of his music.
Yeah, and he's a beautiful musician. I heard him when he was in college because my oldest brother went to Long Beach State with Tom, and I remember hearing Tom. He wrote all the charts for the big band. He was playing all the first tenor solos, and he was just a monster. I mean, at a young age, he was just a monster. In fact, he posted something on Facebook the other day where he did some television show when he was in high school, the Ted Mack Amateur hour, yeah. And so he was there playing soprano sax, playing some Dixieland thing. He was just phenomenal. Anyway, so we played in Tom Kubas' band, and he was working a lot at a weekly gig down at in Huntington Beach, and we were just got a lot of exposure recording with him and playing with him. And in fact, we got a review once when they talked about these. I mean, we were just scraping by financially. We were just kids, scraping by. Yeah. We got this record review saying all these Hollywood musicians driving down from the hills. Yeah, suntanned Hollywood musicians driving down from their homes in the Hollywood Hills to record this music.
There was a bunch of 23-year-old kids. You know?
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. But there's one band, and I got to play in Bill Holman's band for about 15, 20 years, which is great.
Oh yeah, I neglected to mention that one. Obviously, yeah, that's
it was just a learning experience. Just the way he writes, and every chart has his stamp on it. But they're all different, and they're all fascinating, and you can just get lost in the music if you're not paying attention because you're listening. If you start listening too much, you're done because you say, "Oh wow, what's that? Oh my, where am I?" Because you're supposed to be on your own, you know.
Yeah.
But and Gordon's band is just great because you know his writing is just second to none. Really, it's unique. It's different. Every chart's different because he writes different styles of music, not just swing stuff or this. He writes funk music and Latin music and all kinds of different things, and it's a great experience to do because you are playing a lot of different kinds of music, even some classical things thrown in there, you know, some real subtle things. But he doesn't do ballads. That's one thing he doesn't do.
Well, we got one though. The new record has a ballad on it. Though.
Oh, did one make it on there? Oh wow, it's probably a fast ballad, you know.
Well, it's got a double time section in the middle.
Of course, yeah, you can't just play a ballad.
But I tend to agree with Andy. Tom Kubas, that's probably a good example because I learned a lot there because George Graham was a veteran lead trumpet player there. And getting to hear him play, and he brought a lot of experience and old school.
He was the one old guy in the band. We were all kids except for George.
Yeah, he was the old school lead trumpet sound, and like Andy mentioned, you know, Dick Nash and Lloyd and these guys, and as you know, these players came from another time where they played differently, and Warren Looning and George and guys like that come from that. Warren was the last one from that era, really, and he's gone now, unfortunately. That had that old school thing where very easy to play with, and you don't have to question anything. And if the music, he reads the music, but you know, if it's written off on 3, but it's really too early, he's not going to go off on 3. He's going to take it to the natural place, and you don't have to ask. You already know. And so playing with Warren was always, in my opinion, the greatest lead trumpet player I knew in Los Angeles.
Wow.
As great as everybody is, Warren brought more to the table than anybody I've ever met. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, he's phenomenal. He was fantastic.
And maybe back in the day, you know, the Mandy Kleins and those cats, Warren comes from that mold where, you know, they knew tunes, and, you know, modern day players don't know a lot of tunes. Like, you know, Warren could go do a 4-hour gig playing all tunes.
Right.
You know, and he could sit down.
He didn't really read chord changes. That's oddly enough. You know, we'd be in a recording session, there'd be chord changes in front of him, and he wouldn't read them. He would just hear them and play them.
Wow.
Completely natural style and ability. And, you know, and I think, you know, the heart of it all, man, that's what we're striving for, I think, you know. Then he would sit down, he'd play first trumpet in the Hollywood Bowl Orchestra, and no matter what came up, whether it was his cup of tea or not, he would always sound great. whatever it was he had to play, whether it was Wagner, or he would play it with a beautiful sound and great pitch and great style, and then turn right around and play the most blazing Dixieland you've ever heard, and then pound out a high F at the end of this big band chart.
Wow.
And all without a problem. Anyway, so I miss him dearly, and huge influence on my playing.
Yeah.
Not a note I play that I don't think, well, how would Warren play this?
Wow, that's great to have somebody like that, and it's amazing, and be accepting that into your own playing. That's great. Let's shift gears a little bit now and talk about your guys' solo work. Andy, you've released now over a dozen records, I think, as a leader or a co-leader. A couple of my favorites. I still like your leading off CD.
You're probably the only guy on earth that has one of those copies.
I have that.
He used it as a coaster.
Yeah, I
in
have
his
4 of
house.
them.
He would ask me for 6 of them.
And I love the Metropole one that you did.
Oh,
that you mentioned earlier. That's really great. And of course the one you did with Carl Fontana I think is really special. And Wayne, just I'm looking at it so I make sure I get the titles right. But you call this a living, which I think you were nominated for a Grammy for that one. And the other one plays well with others. And you said you got a new one that you're working on right now.
I got 5 tunes done, and so we'll go back in and have to run up another credit card and do another session. I'm
very familiar.
I know
sound.
you are.
You maybe talk a little bit about how you guys approach solo as a solo artist, and then how you approach playing as a leader as opposed to the way you would do as a sideman.
Andy probably approaches this very differently because Andy's more of Andy's a great jazz great jazz player, and I just kind of improvise for fun and kind of learning as I go, So he would prefer to sit down and just play live with the band. And most recordings we've done, when they ask, they'll ask if you want to overdub your solo. Andy will say, I'll play live. He'll be the guy to say, just do it.
Yeah.
And Warren was like that too. If you don't mind me telling one more.
No, not at all.
We were doing a Bob Florence record, and he was asking guys if they wanted overdub, and everybody, all these great players too, saying they want to overdub their solos. And the guys that don't need to do that, but they just for safety's sake, they would do it, And then he goes, Warren, you want to overdub your solo? He goes, well, why the hell would I do that? That's not jazz. And it was and then he stood up and he played the most blazing solo on How Deep Is the Ocean, a tune called Oceanography, real up though. And just one take, that's done. Yeah. Perfect. And it's there you go. He goes, that's jazz, so.
Awesome. But anyway, maybe talk a little bit about how you guys, so you've done so many now, Andy.
It's interesting because when you're doing your own record, it's hard. It's difficult because you're the leader and you have a lot of responsibilities, as you've done it a number of times, and so you have to worry about paying the engineer, and you got to worry about all these other things other than music. Hopefully you're prepared when you go into the studio to play, but that's always seems to be the hardest thing to me, to get into gear to play, to be creative. As a soloist on a record, because you have so many other things to think about. But I did a couple records with this producer named Dick Bank, and that was different because he chose the tunes, he chose the players, even though it was just a quartet record and I was the only horn player. Mm-hmm. But he chose everything except for me. I could just do my thing in his little format. So he's telling me how many choruses to play. He's telling me, it was kind of odd.
And what tie to wear.
Yeah, even he had me wear the corniest tie to the Dick. If you're seeing this, God bless you. But that was an ugly tie you had me wear. Anyways, and it was just, actually Stan Levy took the picture. Stan Levy, the jazz drummer. Yeah, he was a photographer.
Yeah.
And he took the picture. I'm sure he's just rolling his eyes. In fact, he did roll his eyes at me a couple times what's with this guy, man? Anyway, so, but he had control over the whole situation. And, luckily for me, he paid me and he paid the other musicians and paid for the recording and paid for the liner notes and paid for the pictures and paid for, So in that respect, it was great. But it wasn't my statement because it wasn't just my playing. But it wasn't how many choruses I would have played. It wasn't the tunes I would have chosen. It wasn't all that other stuff. So the few times I've done that, it's been a lot more interesting for me because I did my latest quartet record was with Christian Jacob and Trey Henry and Ray Brinker, which is the rhythm section I prefer to use most of the time if I can get them, Yeah. So if I get these guys, they're great. And Christian wrote these charts and they're just beautiful. And so it was really inspiring to, all the different feels he gave the music with his arrangements and how creative those guys are on the spot and how well they work together as a unit because they've been a unit for a long time. Not only on Christian's trio records, but on Tierney Sutton's records and different things they do as a trio.
Right.
So in that respect, playing was very easy and very difficult at the same time because the music was difficult, but it was easy to play with those guys, and it was what I would prefer to do every time. But the few times I've had records made for me, it's been kind of a little bit handcuffed, you know. But Wayne's making big band records, and he's got a whole different hat he wears on those things.
Yeah, it's a different thing. For me, I have to think about all those. I'm thinking about all those money issues. You know, when you're the leader, you'll be the nicest guy in the world, but as soon as you're paying the bill, you're like, all right, guys, let's get moving here. Shut up, quit goofing off. You know, you become that guy. You know. Yeah. And I just lost my
Make
pack
the
here.
10-minute breaks 8 minutes instead.
Yeah,
of
it's
10
exactly. You know, but I mean, I try to, you know, of course, stay calm and make sure everybody's happy and have food there and all that. So there's a lot of stuff to think about, like you said, when you're the leader and the bill. But for me, it's big band stuff, and most of my stuff is going to, you know, there's going to be an element of physical abuse involved with the way everybody writes for me. I've got a pile of charts, guys that write for me. I go, okay, I can't play that live. I can't play that. Like, you know, I could do them one maybe, but I can't do them in a 7-tune set.
Right.
So I have to pick the tunes I play based on, well, what can I really play?
Yeah.
In a live setting. So I kind of look at it like, even though I overdub a lot of my stuff, I play some of it live and then overdub some. It's a little mixture of both. But I have to think about my chops. And if I'm going to have to play this tune 3 times, I'm going to be done for the day.
Yeah.
And I got 4 other tunes to do. So the way we did this last session is I kind of played a scratch track with the band in a little makeshift ISO booth. And then I just had 3 trumpets up there. And then I would do another take and I'd go sit and play 4th trumpet and save a salary.
Yeah.
And I figure, well, let's come back later. And I may play some of the melody stuff live. And then I'll come back and I'll go through this solo section or maybe the high part at the end. I'll overdub later. You know, which is a little bit, you know, there's that line of ethics, you know, but I think my take on it is if you can reproduce it live, you're just trying to get your best performance recorded onto those discs, you know, and so that's kind of how I approach it. So when I'm playing, I try to make sure everything I'm playing on there is not studio magic. And I'll play something and I'm not going to piece something together like a bunch of high things, you know, and then never be able to play it. And I think that's crossing the ethics line a little bit. So, you know, I have to think about that when I'm doing this. And then soloing wise, I try to pick tunes. I'm not a great improviser. I'm not going to be playing on really hard tunes or really burning fast tempos, which is not what I do. Like him, I wanted to be a lead trumpet player. So that's all I did going through. I didn't improvise through high school. I did, but kind of, you know, I didn't know that there was, you know, a flat tire and a flat 9. just crashing and burning at every 2/5. You know, I figured double high C works here, and everybody clap. I go, see, that's good. You know, it's the great equalizer. You know, so in a nutshell, that's you know, I approach it like that, and so I have a home studio now to save money, like I was explaining. I have Pro Tools and a nice rear mic and a nice mic pre, and I can do things and save thousands of dollars, you know.
Yeah, that's
I'm
great.
doing my own.
And I have to say, just having heard you so many times live, there's not much that you can't play, and there is no studio magic. For you, it ends up being like, well, this is just going to make it. I can make the session go longer, and you know, to make this thing work. It's not a question of studio magic where you're concerned. I have to say.
Yeah, well, people. I mean, you'd be surprised. People always, you know, they question that, you know, and they
well, then they need to hear you play live. Yeah. And then,
so I try to reproduce it live. But actually, you know, one of those things, and you might notice this too, from doing overdub things, where maybe you've worked a solo out on something. We played 16 bars and then you sucked and you go, well, let me play another 16 bars. You maybe piece a couple of things together and it's really good, you know, and then you kind of learn something from that. You go, man, that's cool the way that goes together. And you'll learn that. It becomes part of your arsenal of that direction anyway, you know. So for me, doing a couple of CDs has made me a better jazz player, you know. So I feel a little more confident now. If I have to do that in a situation, I'm not so terrified to blow. Usually there's a bunch of trumpet players that do that, you know, so I don't even bother with it. I go, let me hit the double high C and you play that flat 9 and we'll all go away happy, you know.
Yeah, good stuff. You guys are both Yamaha artists and clinicians, and I think you get a big hand in designing the instruments you guys both play. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I think there's some
He did more designing than I did. I played a lot of the instruments for Yamaha and 2 of their horns, and I think Wycliffe played a lot for them. So basically that means sitting in the room and just playing the instrument, trying another slide with another bell, trying this with that, and playing the same kind of exercises over and over and over again, so people listening can check it out, and they ask you how you feel playing the horn. And that's usually what, you know, hey, the slide feels great, it feels like a quick response, it feels good, this doesn't feel so good. So we, you know, kind of hone it in over a series of, you know, a number of times, doing it maybe 5 or 8 times. I went into the Yamaha place, played horns for them, and gave them my input. Wayne was more into the designing, like, let's drill this size of whatever, and, you know, I'm kind of an idiot when it comes to all that stuff. I just get something I like, and then I just, I get something I like, and I just play it.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
He hones it in and figures out, you know, like the little rubber bottom thing on the slide is going to make the tone change completely. Yeah, right, you know. Oh, the voodoo. I'm not the voodoo guy. He's the voodoo guy.
There is some voodoo involved with all that. You know, we do a little thing where we light incense and wave a dead rat over the thing, and it plays better. But
I was just trying that myself last week. Actually, it does work well.
But Bob Malone approached me years ago about jumping on board with Yamaha, and when we started designing the horn, I said my only prerequisite with this is I want to just for me to sign off on this, it has to play better than what I'm playing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be one of those players that gets involved with a big company. There's all the perks of that, and then they don't really play the instrument. And there's a lot of those people. I mean, it's the Yamaha artists, and I see them on sessions. They're not playing Yamaha. I was like, hey, come on, man, these people are gonna paying you for clinics and stuff. So, fortunately, I had, I got to help design. So I have my role model here. I wanted to play better than this. So Bob Malone and I, it was a five-year trek from start to horn being on the market. And
pretty good chunk of time.
We made different lead pipes and moved braces. I mean, it was very intricate. And he's right, there was a little voodoo. We're moving this brace, a 32nd of an inch this way, and moving the bell brace and changing the bell bead, and trying different weighted caps. And because weight, a rubber stopper is not going to do anything. But if you add 5 ounces to a trumpet, it's going to play different. It's a lot of weight. On an instrument that doesn't weigh that much. So, and depending where it's placed, stuff near the end of the bell, the way it resonates, and so. Do we have it perfect? I don't know. There's human elements involved. So when you're testing, the next time it's different. So you have to, for me, what I did was I started doing blindfold tests. I even did it with Andy, actually, where I'd take my Yamaha and my old trumpet, which was a Canstall, which was a really great horn. I played for years, played many good notes on it. And it always still, because it was like that old shoe, even felt better, no matter how good this played. I go, this is better. Mm-hmm. So I started doing blindfold tests with the people with Yamaha. Made them all turn around so there's no Yamaha bias. And I put the horns through their test. And I keep notes. And every positive remark was for the Yamaha. I'm going, it's just not true. It doesn't feel that way. And I did it with college kids. I did it with Andy. I did it with violinists. And so that's how I ended up.
You did what with
even violinists?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because they're not listening to trumpet stuff. They're listening for other stuff. I don't know what it is. Yeah. They don't, apparently they don't really listen to anything most of the time, but at least they can say, well, that's less abrasive than the first one. I hate that one a little less. So.
Yeah, that was my test. I said, that hurts, okay, and that hurts. Okay, that hurts more. Is that better?
And I would say that was better. It hurt more. So that's kind of how the design came to be. And it's actually been a very popular horn amongst, the idea was to make a horn that could do everything.
Right.
So a horn that's not too bright, and a lot of classical players use it as their instrument of B flat of choice. A lot of jazz players will get them. They actually take the lacquer off. I notice a lot of the jazzer guys play them raw brass. And then a lot of lead trumpet players, I see them in a lot of college bands when I go to play. There's a lot of them in the ranks there, along with Bobby Schuh's horn.
Right.
And it's kind of the bookend to his horn in a lot of ways. Same design concepts in there. But.
Well, that's great. Congratulations with that.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of trumpet players in New York who've told me that it's a great horn.
It's really, I'm really proud of how it came out. And I designed the whole thing from scratch myself. A lot of people don't know that. If you believe that.